wondering, with the community still growing, should they have implemented stricter controls and make the water conservation mandatory on the new communities so that the new communities can show light to the older communities?
So what you're asking is whether or not the new communities and the new codes and more stringent conservation regulations?
Go backwards, yeah. It's really hard to retrofit an older house. So you start with the new communities, you make it very strict. And they could have had the requirements, I think, overall. And she says we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. But if slight changes are made over time, do you think it could be controlled? And even the growth of this town could be even increased?
Yeah, I think that those there are technologies. It's quite funny because you asked a really interesting question in terms of taking up that slack that I was talking about. Because
well, I see it. I mean, you've got grass here, which is not natural. Bermuda grass doesn't grow. It grows in Bermuda. That's why it's called Bermuda grass. We're putting stuff here. And with some minor changes, do you think the town can actually grow to be larger?
Yeah, I do. I think there's enough slack that you can take up to do that. Now,
I agree with you.
Okay, I just want to talk to you about a couple of the things. First of all, urban landscaping. Kelowna uses 24% of its treated water supply for outdoor landscaping water resources.
So you're saying
You've got to be crazy. Pardon me?
Minor changes could be done over time?
Well, you have to, again, this leads to people's property rights and their sense of what they want. And if the community decides that it's prepared to change its landscaping and xeriscaping situations, then you can have that. But here's my point, and you're asking me whether or not you can get those savings, and I don't know enough about your community, but here's where the problem comes. You can get those savings and you can get really stringent water conservation gains, but if you continue to grow your population too rapidly or too big, that will eat up the gains.
I understand that, but if you make them in place over time, you still save it back, don't you? It's like energy efficiency.
Okay, another easy way to do it, another very easy way to do it, you take a 300-room apartment building and you put in low-flow toilets in every one of the savings are astronomical. There are lots of gains here, and you add them up. And I agree, that makes a big difference.
I think our former speaker, whatever his name was, will be absolutely thrilled to know that in January our council passed a resolution that we will mount the most aggressive water conservation campaign you have ever seen. So much so that we have staff dedicated to trying to figure out what is the most technologically advanced, radical way that we could go about conserving water in our community. We did the math, I think it was Bill Robertson who figured out, do you know what, I think we need 20% more water to get to our build out. Well, if we can enact 20% water conservation in our community, we can get to build out. So that will be unfolding. One of the key pieces that we're stuck in this province is that we're not allowed to reuse water. It's illegal. So we want it to be the pilot community in Alberta to show that we can use technologies that allow us to recycle water. BC does it, Ontario does it, California does it. We know the technology exists, but currently it's not legal to use it in Alberta. So we want to be the community that pilot tests this technology so that we can increase our water conservation, which again is already the highest in the province and one of the best in North America. That said, even if we get to build out and we do this water conservation, droughts are coming. This water expert in his book has deeply persuaded me of, on top of which we have climate change. Then what are we going to do? And if we are a community that doesn't have a drought plan in place, and when it comes, and it will come, and I believe somewhere in the book you even implicated that it might be within 10 years, we don't have a backup plan for water for our community, and all of the users, all of those of us that have water licenses on the sheep, don't have a backup plan. Our sheep river could become what happened in Australia, dry, trickle. Then where are we going to be? So that's where it's a hard spot. Water conservation, we hope will get us maybe one of the key strategies that gets us to build out, but what's our long-term vision around potential droughts, potential climate change impacts? So that leads me to the question. So one of the solutions that the province is pitching our way is that there's this pipeline from the boat. And what I found very striking in your book, which is my second question, and I believe over page 138, you went in great detail about how there's the ethics of how Calgary has this bloated, I believe was the term you used, well in excess of a water license, and that instead of sharing that water regionally, it is hoarding, and again these are quotes I believe, hoarding that water and using it as an opportunity to profit off of this very large water license that was allocated very early on. And that you're concerned about, let me just find the passage, it's far more articulate than I can be. Page 138, I believe. The similarities between Calgary and Los Angeles are a precautionary value. In many ways, Calgary is where Los Angeles was in the 1920s in terms of its relative development, which is rapid population expansion. It has a huge senior water license that gives it priority access to far more water than it deserves or needs. The Los Angeles example warns us that having more water than you can use at the expense of surrounding areas invariably causes problems that lead to challenges and conflict. Control over such a volume of water is the result of a combination of historical accident and a water policy created in the 19th century that will not address the 21st century problems Alberta has begun to face. Calgary's waterworks, by Canadian standards, are well run, but this does not mean that there aren't political concerns about the city's agenda with respect to using its huge water license as a hammer to solidify regional power. Concerns are being expressed about the city's obvious plan to use its large license as a means of pressuring water-scarce rural communities in the direction of annexation. And moreover, Calgary's abundance of water is only real on paper. It's nothing more than a license. Though the City Waters Department is working hard to curtail per capita water use, Calgary remains adamant that it does not want to give up its water. It has built a corral around its water hole and will do whatever legally possible to defend it. So too has Southern Alberta's other big water users, the irrigation community. And you go on. So I guess my question is, this is why we're between a rock and a hard spot. Our community is facing these huge dilemmas around what to do with water. And the Bow, for lots of reasons, is the flow. We're not convinced that the science is there, that the Bow can actually accommodate the population it's hoping to serve in the region. Plus, the projections of the amount of water in the Bow may not have taken into account the drought and climate change concerns that you identify in your book. So I guess that's where we're stuck as a community, and I don't know if you have some further comments about this water hammer, this Calgary water hammer, and it's corralling around the hole, and whether there's ways that we can play leadership, maybe regionally or provincially as a community, where this is all coming to a head right here, right now. We're the community where it's all coming to a head in Alberta, and whether or not we can play a greater leadership role in having the region think differently about water, and that together we all raise our consciousness about how the region, we're all in this together, and if we're not conserving and we're not partnering and we're not thinking about can we profit and can we drop a hammer, because in the end we'll all lose.
Okay. Last time I talked about this, I caused a minor riot in Calgary incidentally. Okay. First of all, what you're talking about here is larger level provincial water policy reform. When we look at the global water crisis, it's not a crisis of absolute water availability. It's a crisis of governance. When I talk about governance, there's two types of scarcity: absolute water scarcity, where there just isn't enough water, and institutional scarcity, where the structures of governance are not adequate to move the water around to meet all the needs that people have when they have them. And what we have in Alberta is water governance logjam. Provincial water policy reform has been playing around the edges. We'll let some sorts of water market presence operate to see how that goes, but what we need is a total water policy reform. You bring up the need for new water reuse standards and policies. We have to have them. We just absolutely have to have them. And that will help us take up a lot of slack. And new technologies are available. EPCOR is very good at this, and they know how to do this stuff, but they're as constrained as municipalities are in terms of being able to implement some sort of technology, because they don't have the standards, they don't have the policy, they don't have the legal frameworks in place. Paul Fesco at the City of Calgary doesn't agree with me on that, incidentally. But here's the thing, the point I want to make out: first in time, first and right. has to be revisited. If you want to reform water policy, as uncomfortable and difficult it is, and these are the difficult things we need leadership to do, we have to face those things and deal with them and look at them. Because first in time, first in rights are obstacles to water policy reform. The City of Calgary's big water license is a governance issue. And so what we have is you're seeing as a community at the leading edge of where you're developing, where you're growing, where you're living, the basin in which you live, you're seeing confronting 19th century water policy structures and you're trying to manage 21st century problems within those governance structures. And it is highly limiting. This is why expanded leadership, higher level, broader reform, and I think it might have to go as far as federal, provincial, constitutional issues and accountabilities and responsibilities for water as a resource and an asset. I think it's going to have to go there in order to solve the kinds of problems that you brought up.